Panels, well, we do agree that the current status quo of the voting conditions and results of what is going on right now is not ideal. However, we vehemently reject the opening government's premise that they want to try to preserve real democracy and ensure that everyone receives the best interest in the results of elections by taking away the rights of certain individuals. Why do we disagree? Because we think in their world, like even the idea of proper democracy will not exist. The reason being is because like, the proposal is absolutely not justifiable and will only infringe the interests of everyone and harm the vulnerable ones even more. So before I move on to my substantive, I would like to offer some rebuttals regarding the Prime Minister's case. So first of all, let's talk about the idea of why we need standardized political knowledge that is crucial for real democracy to survive. Because what this argument is based on the idea that there's far-ranging consequences, right? So first of all, what the government states is like the one that is they try to protect is the marginalized communities. However, it's exactly because of the fact that the one that they are most comfortably skipping over is the individual's right, the ability to vote. Thus, it will make these people so much worse because it means that it's taking away their ability to represent themselves, right? Their ability for these marginalized communities to represent themselves. And also, this consequence will also be unlikely to happen, right? Because like even though these politicians try to fit away these for marginalized communities with unsustainable narratives and which is like oversimplified, these politicians have the responsibility to be able to sustain this simplified narrative. That otherwise, the narrative that they try to bring and fail to deliver will result in like real life consequences. Even though like these people quote unquote may be less educated, but there will still be real life. There will still be consequences that materializing in real life. There will still be breach of trust happening, and these people will not be wanting to vote for this individual again, right? So now let's talk about the idea why it's okay for them to take away the right of vote. First of all, let's say that their principle is based on something that is like overly simplified and there's like way more nuance than what they have been brought to us. Because like the fact that there's this voting have like harms and thus you need to be able to prove that you're accountable is really unrepresentative. Because like the fact is for the really tangible laws that in power is able to materialize, there still needs general consensus, right? These laws still need to pass parliament, they still need to pass the general vote, there's still already checks and balances that prevents these political leaders to overuse and misuse powers based on constitutional and other and etc. So that's even in like the worst case scenario when this check and balances fail to materialize in like super corrupt places like let's say Belarus, like even like there still be grassroots movements that eventually take place and galvanize due to the popular unrest, right? And even in like these countries that are as oppressive and like maybe these people are like uneducated, there'll still be educated ones, the young ones that gonna step up and champion for them due to the mutual unrest and injustice that happens, right? And so the idea that there are benefits, the last idea that they say that there will be benefits materially, it will not happen at all. Because first, in relation on their first argument, the idea they want to bring standardized knowledge, it's unlikely to ever happen. Because like in fact, that politics is always based on like bias, right? Even if like you bring facts, there's always gonna be facts that are gonna be biasing towards. So that's the idea of standardization. It's like really unlike maybe the facts, but there's still gonna be conservatives gravitating that their policies are valid because of there's like economic growth, and there's like liberals that gravitate toward the facts that there's problems in the status quo. That's the benefits that they build the basis of their benefit that they want to champion cannot really materialize, right? Because standardization will not really ever occur. So that's we concede like the idea that there's still gonna be polarization, the polarization will still exist, right? Even if they try to bring. So now let's move on to my substantive. First of all, why it's principally so important to be able to still vote, even though like this status in individual is still not ideal, because like this is a value that needs to be preserved to all citizens, right? It encompasses all citizens, because voting is a mechanism that affirms on what form of decisions that get to influence in your life as a citizen, right? Because the results of the vote gets to materialize in the form of government that influence on based on what and how your life is able to continue in that particular country, right? So taking away this right, no matter the reason, is very unjustified, because it means that you are taking away your only lifeline to so many policies policies that will materialize and affect your lives. And this value encompasses like every single individual, because everyone is a stakeholder, right? They don't have to say on whether they want to be a citizen of this country or not. So no matter how poor or rich you are, as someone who is impacted by this decision, you have the right to say on what decisions will take upon your life. It's unjustified to base it on intellectual quotient, because not everyone has the same IQ capacity, but everyone has the same have a right to say on what decisions get to infringe their lives, right? So let's talk about the impact on what will happen if like these policies do actually occur. So the impact that will actually happen is like, because this voting is also an ability to create a change, it's also a safety mechanism. This will ensure that this greater power that the influence is trying to protect doesn't get abused. So by taking away the safety mechanism, it will be ultimately very bad, because it means the actual check and balance that ensure that this quote-unquote vulnerable and less educated individuals will never be liberated, because they'll never be able to create actual structural reforms that prevents them to fight against the systematic injustices, that prevents them from ever reaching the necessary amount of education to liberate themselves. Because even though like you say that knowledge is a tool that makes sure that everyone is equitable, but it's also a tool that is highly misused by the people that are higher social class in order to justify the oppression of this lower class, right? Because they take away their access to education. And thus the safety mechanism that comes in our side, which doesn't get to materialize, because the communities that the grassroots movements are trying to protect gets their voting power also invalidated, right? This also cripples their movement. And this needs to be considered heavily, because they're the one that is utilizing this voting mechanism to try liberating themselves, right? By taking away this liberation cannot materialize democratically and peacefully, right? And because it means that you need external revolution, right? You cannot use the democratic powers anymore. That's like, for example, the African American activism, by affecting the narrative construct to persuade public opinion. This is what makes these social laws that are the racial discrimination laws are being so test, right? Because they are using this capacity of the democratic system to actually accommodate to their vulnerable needs, right? Thus elevating their standing in the community. And thus the values of upholding integrity of democracy will never be lost, because democracy isn't about creating the perfect ideal narrative, but it's making sure that everyone's narrative is represented, right? So let's talk about the trade-off, which is unlikely to happen because of the checks and balances I have said before, whether to voting out and etc. etc. Even if there's a basis of truth on what the government has said that there's still problems, it is like first justified because it will not last forever, and the misuse of power will also result in dissent and eventual change, and most eventually, but at least the democracy will still have a safety mechanism to reform the system. This is why it's principally wrong to vote out to be able to take away the vote, and we're very proud to oppose this motion.